Boker Tov, good morning.
Boker Tov.
Um, but there are probably one or two people who won't be coming because there wasn't a reminder email
Oh,
that
goody.
reminded everybody about with the Zoom link and whatever. So many of us are in in that pattern of the need to get the reminder rather than being able to find it on our own. Uh, but anyway, I know that this is being recorded, and Les will have it
Yes.
up, probably later this afternoon. So welcome to all who are either with us uh,
Mhm.
in real time or else belated time, whichever it might be. Okay,
Yes.
so the book of Joshua. I'm not going to go back through the introduction again.
No.
Uh, which took some of the time last week, and then we were reading and discussing and questioning, and we got through uh, the crossing, the actual crossing of the Jordan River. We
Yes, we
noted
did.
that's at the end of chapter 4,
War.
and and we noticed that the narrator or the writer intentionally tries to remind us that there are parallels between the children of Israel crossing the Reed Sea and the children of Israel crossing the Jordan, what I call the Jordan Stream, rather than the Jordan River, but and that they were able to cross on dry land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're now ready to start chapter 5, uh,
Mm.
which leads us into the rituals that God tells Joshua to impose upon the people, um, to strengthen them, to affirm their faith, and then to begin the conquest. And then, as we shall see, just like the children of Israel in the 40 years of wandering, it's not just a simple, okay, here's the goal and here's how we have to get there, because there are all kinds of intervening episodes and crises and questions and challenges that come along the way. So we'll the pattern the pattern here is we're going to read in much more complete blocks, I suppose. And if we do have questions, rather than the Saturday morning model, which is in shorter blocks of text, and perhaps going off on lots of different tangents. But let's begin with chapter 5,
Mhm.
and go from um, up through verse 9.
Okay.
If I have, and we should do the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kichanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Torah. Amen.
Amen. Okay, so do I have a volunteer? Maybe we should make the doctor read this because
Yes,
it's about a
definitely.
surgical procedure, right? Okay, so
Yes.
Okay, you're
Okay.
victimizing the doctor here. Okay. When all the kings of the Amorites on the western side of the Jordan and all the kings of the Canaanites near the sea heard how God had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the sake of the Israelites until they crossed over, they lost heart, and no spirit was left in them because of the Israelites. Okay. And just so people know, I don't have cue cards. I'm reading from Sepharia, which is the online.
yeah, that's fine.
At that time, God said to Joshua, make flint knives and proceed with a second circumcision of the Israelites. So
Now that doesn't mean that means this is the second time that we're having a group circumcision. It doesn't mean that people would be circumcised a second time.
yeah,
Right.
it's bad
Okay.
enough the first time, usually.
Right, right.
Oh, right, like you remember. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I had two, but that's a story. I won't get into that right now.
No, let's not go there.
Okay.
Please, please.
Okay. So Joshua had flint knives made, and the Israelites were circumcised at Gibeat ha'arolot, ha'arolot, which is the
Foreskin.
or la is
Right.
the part that is circumcised off.
Okay, come on.
That is, yeah. So, I'm sorry. This is the reason why Joshua had the circumcision performed. All the people who had come out of Egypt, all the males of military age, had died during the desert wanderings after leaving Egypt. Now, whereas all such people who came out of Egypt had been circumcised, none of those born after the Exodus during the desert wanderings had been circumcised. Okay. For the Israelites had traveled in the wilderness 40 years until the entire nation, the men of military age who had left Egypt, had perished because they had not obeyed God, and God had sworn never to let them see the land that God had sworn to their fathers, to assign to us a land flowing with milk and honey. But God had raised up their sons in their stead, and it was these that Joshua circumcised, for they were uncircumcised, not having been circumcised on the way. After the circumcising of the whole nation was completed, they remained where they were in the camp until they recovered.
Okay.
And God said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt." So that place was called Gilgal, as it still is. And Gilgal is the word is like Galgal, which is a wheel, okay, or something that
Right.
rolls. So that's
That's
the
really
root.
weird.
Or I guess the root is actually, roots aren't usually 4 letters, so the actual root is Gimel, Lamed, Lamed. But
Right.
you
Yeah.
can sometimes repeat the first 2 letters. Okay.
Yeah. And right. And we had encountered that. So this may be a different author because we had encountered Gilgal being named previously. Okay. So and now this author, or in a different story, a different myth, this story wants to connect it to the circumcision. Right? And then there's a third comment, again, because of the Hebrew. Steve just said, for those of you who either forgot or didn't remember, that a Hebrew root usually has the 3 root consonants. So it's Gimel, Lamed, Lamed. But there's a rabbinic comment that this doesn't come from that. It comes from Gimel, Laled, Gimel, Laled, Gimel. I'm having a tough day. Gimel, Lamed, Hey, which is reveal. Okay. And so this is like, again, this is parallel. This is a parallel event to the initiation of the Israelites as a people. So they had their revelation at Sinai. Now this is the revelation that's given. Again, it's playing on the words here and there. So whatever. Okay. Any comments or questions on this second circumcision story?
The only thing I saw was something about, I rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt. I assume they're talking about slavery. I'm not sure I would call it a disgrace. It's a disgrace of bondage. I don't know. That's just me.
Again, the classic is that the disgrace was that they, for 400 years or whatever, they had not practiced circumcision.
Oh, okay.
Now that may or may not be true, because when we go back to the story of Moses in the basket floating down the Nile, right? How did the Pharaoh's daughter know that this was an Israelite boy?
Oh,
okay.
Good
and the
question.
assumption was that she saw that he was circumcised, therefore he was an Israelite.
Okay.
So but one doesn't always. It's like no present or past that Rabbi Miri always talks about. Similarly, don't worry about contradictions.
Yeah.
But they also said within this text that the circumcised generation died out. So they were actually practicing circumcision.
Like I said, don't worry about the contradiction. Don't worry about the
the
contradiction, whether
disgrace.
they were or whether they weren't. Some of the
Yeah,
rabbis said they weren't,
yeah.
or maybe that means that they hadn't practiced it because they were doing other things in the time, in the Exodus, and children who were
Or
born and whatever. So
but
you know,
but they also weren't really practicing Judaism per
right.
se at all. So that may have been the disgrace was, yeah,
Yep. Yeah, could be.
circumcision,
Could be.
yes, no,
That's,
but they
perfectly valid. Right. My older English translation is reproach, not
Reproach,
disgrace. So,
reproach.
right.
Interesting
Okay.
word.
All right.
oh,
Okay.
let me see what verse was that? I just want to see what the word is that's used in
Nine.
Nine,
Nine.
nine.
it was verse 9.
Cher-
Hayom
Cherpat.
cherpa,
Cherpa.
which is, in modern Hebrew, that is kind of a disgrace.
Yeah, right.
Both busha v'cherpa. I'm not sure what the root is. I could, if people don't mind, I could look it up in
Yeah,
the etymological dictionary. Is that okay? Because
sure, go ahead.
that'll take me a minute. Somebody could take over the reading if you want to continue.
Okay, well, we're going to move on from circumcision as one of the foundational practices of the Israelites.
Mhm.
Okay, we understand that. That's the Ot Habrit. That's the sign of the covenant, is the circumcision. To ultimately, what is the most important ritual, festival, celebration in the Israelite calendar, if you will, and that's Pesach,
That's it.
right? So
Right.
the celebration of freedom, the celebration of God's redemption from Egypt, and so therefore Joshua, in order to affirm the legitimacy, the authenticity of his leadership, and the fact that we're going to maintain what we would today call tradition. We're going to maintain those what I would refer to from in my the way that I teach it. These are the memory triggers, right?
Right.
So having a Passover, to whatever extent it is, but that's a memory trigger that connects us to our past and to our peoplehood.
Right.
So as of verse 10, now 1 through 9 was circumcision. Now as of verse 10, we're going to make sure that we celebrate the Passover.
Okay.
All right, Steve, did you find
Yes,
Kerpal, whatever?
yes, I did. It says to reproach from Aramaic, charaf, he sharpened, he blasphemed, reviled, or reproached. And charif is
Yeah,
from the same root.
right.
Charif is sort of sharp, acute, or keen, sort of a real sort of wise guy in the class is sometimes called.
Oh, you're going to talk about the wise guy in the class. I was going to talk about the harif, the real sharp spice that
or that too, yeah.
that my son likes to put on his food.
So it's a sharp. So this is the sort of connections between words that come from the same root is not always that clear. You have to think about it a little bit. That's a reproach and spicy. But okay. But from Syriac, it also has he sharpened. So it's like sharpness. Oh, it's also acrid, pungent. Okay.
Okay.
And in modern Hebrew, it's just spicy,
Yeah.
Meaning of the word. What else do they say here? Yeah. And from other Semitic languages, it became used as reviled or was cursed. Okay. Also aggravated or worsened. So these are all words, from the same kind of root. Okay.
Right. Okay. All right. Verses 10 and 11, or 10 through 12.
Okay.
Yeah, shall I
Anyone want to
continue?
read, please?
Yeah, go speak.
Go ahead, Marianne, please.
Okay, 10 through 12. So this is really small. Okay, where is it? Encamped at the Gilgad and the steeps of Jericho. The Israelites offered the Passover sacrifice on the 14th day of the month toward evening. On the day after the Passover offering, on that very day, they ate of the produce of the country, unleavened bread and parched grain. On the same day when they ate of the produce of the land, the manna ceased. The Israelites got no more manna. That year they ate the yield of the land of Canaan.
Okay. So now, as an indication, I mean, we talked about the importance of celebrating Passover, but as an indication that they were truly inheriting the land,
Right.
they didn't need manna from heaven anymore.
Yep.
They were going to be able to eat of the produce of the land, right? Okay.
Yeah, but I
That
want
also-
more than milk and honey. I want more than milk and honey.
You want
Well,
more
I-
than milk and honey?
If
Well,
I
you're
want
going to
to
get
off
parched.
land,
You're
I
going to
need
get
more
parched.
than-
You're going to get
milk.
parched corn.
Okay.
Well, the other parallel I see in that particular phrase is that they are now going to get their food through their own efforts.
Uh-huh.
In other words, God isn't going to be just showering them with manna. Now it's up to you. It's your responsibility to provide.
Yeah, no, God's saying, I am no longer going to provide. Doesn't mean that I'm deserting you,
No.
right?
But you're going to have to feed yourselves, in other words, okay?
Yeah.
So that's a maturing, I mean, that's, they're supposed to be maturing themselves as they're going through this process, so that's one
Right.
step. Okay.
Right. Okay. Now, can we move on? Otherwise,
Yeah, just-
it'll take us 3 weeks and we'll get through chapter 7 and that'll be all.
Oh, like
So-
Torah class, okay. Good.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, just on this one point, that's agriculture does require settlement. It requires a
Oh,
continuous
tilling of the field. And the whole,
settlement.
sure.
Well, it continues, and until now, there was no continuous settlement. They were wandering. They couldn't really practice agriculture at all.
Well,
Right.
it could have been hunter-gatherers in that area. They didn't have to necessarily settle
Mm,
if they were
Wow.
hunting, within a smaller region, not, the whole Sinai Desert. But
Right.
anyway,
Well, you can't wander too far because the country's not that big.
Well, and again, I mean, they knew that there were fruits and vegetables and and grains in the land, available to them once they crossed,
Right.
because Moses' spies, Joshua and Caleb, when they came back, had brought tales that was all available. So, okay.
Yeah, the society has changed. It really has. Or it's
Which
changed.
society? Which society?
Well, the Israelites,
Yeah.
now the people have changed, it's a whole different setup now.
Okay. All right. There's an interesting story now that for the rest of chapter 5. I'm gonna read. It came to pass when Joshua was near Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. Joshua went to him and said, "Are you for us, or are you for our adversary? Are you for us or against us?"
Mhm.
And he said, I mean, the other man, no, lo, I am captain of the host of the Lord, of the Sva Adonai, the army of the Lord. I am now come before you. Joshua fell on his face to the earth and bowed down and said to him, what is your word to me? What is your message to me? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, put off your shoe from your foot, for the place where you stand is holy ground. And Joshua did so. Okay.
The burning bush.
Another parallel story
right,
to
Burning bush.
burning bush. Exactly. Right. Including take off your feet. Take your
shoes.
sandals off your feet, for the
Right.
ground on which you are standing is holy.
No, this is
Okay,
holy
so
ground. Right.
it's a parallel. But here, God doesn't speak directly to Joshua. God's servant. God's the captain of the host, so to speak, officer of the guard, is the one who brings the message.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, could I make a comment on the
Oh.
language?
of course, of course, of course.
Yeah, just something we passed through very quickly was, are you for us or against us?
Uh-huh.
And we're so used to that expression that you say, oh, yeah, well, no big deal. That's the way people talk. But people talk that way sometimes because it was first used in the Bible. Some of these expressions entered English through the Bible. Some entered through, say, Shakespeare, but there are expressions that are actually originated from the Bible because the Bible was widely read. Because in the Hebrew, it does actually say that. It says, are you for us or against us? Literally. Which is sort of an interesting expression. You don't,
Right.
People aren't necessarily for you or against you. They could be neutral too. That's a very specific kind of idea. Are you for us or against us?
Right. Dr. Friedman, that's the commentary that I'm looking at here, gives the following to the captain's answer. Okay. The answer is somewhat obscure. Apparently, he meant that in the wider design of God, there's no partiality for any people. That's the no. Okay. The victory of one and the defeat of the other are both part of the same pattern of God's lofty purpose. So that's a different interpretation of it. Okay. Chapter 6.
Oh,
Chapter 6
okay.
tells us of the story that was based upon the old spiritual song, Joshua hit the bottle of Geritol, right? Okay.
Oh,
No, you don't know, you didn't remember that one?
That was bad, really
Oh,
bad.
sing on, Rabbi, sing on.
I told you it's a bad day, Gail. I'm sorry.
Oh, really?
I'm sorry.
I'm
Yeah.
taking
So
note.
chapter 6 primarily deals with the story of Jericho, much of which it's kind of back there in our minds, something about going around and lots of shofar blasts, and and the walls all came tumbling
And the
down.
walls came tumbling down.
Right. But did they? But did they? Both according to the text and according to archaeologists. So let's see what we have to do. Who would like to take chapter 6?
I will. How far do we want me to go?
Why don't you go through 11?
11. Okay. Now Jericho was shut up tight because of the Israelites. No one could leave or enter. The Lord said to Joshua, see, I will deliver Jericho and her king and her warriors into your hands. Let all your troops march around the city and complete one circuit of the day. Do this 6 days with 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horns preceding the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. And when a long blast is sounded on the horn, as soon as you hear that sound of the horn, all the people shall give a mighty shout. Thereupon the city wall will collapse, and the people shall advance, every man straight ahead. Joshua, son of Nun, summoned the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant and let 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horns precede the ark of the Lord. And he instructed the people, go forward, march around the city, and with the vanguard marching in front of the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had instructed the people, the 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horns advanced before the Lord, blowing their horns, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The vanguard marched in front of the priests who were blowing the horns, and the rear guard marched behind the ark with the horns sounding all the time. But Joshua's orders to the rest of the people were, do not shout, do not let your voices be heard, and do not let a sound issue from your lips until the moment that I command you. Shout, then you shall shout. This is very repetitive, This is this is what I'm going to teach you. Then they have the class, and this is what I did teach you. So we got
Well, yeah, yes, and no, but it's also strategy. It's also military strategy.
Oh, okay.
yeah. Oh, did you want me to read 11 or was it?
Yeah, read 11, sure.
Okay, I thought it was up to 11. So we had the ark of the Lord go around the city and complete one circuit. Then they returned to camp and spent the night in camp.
Okay.
Okay.
So the stage is set,
Mhm.
and we know what's going to happen. Most of the commentary is based on um, uh, primarily on verse 5. Okay. That and what I found is that the God is proclaiming that a miracle will happen. Okay. That the walls are going to fall down or fall down flat or however you want to phrase it, and that there's kind of a dual message there. It's God continues to provide, and God continues to be a warrior for the people. That's part number one. And then the subtext is to make sure that they don't feel that the army or the soldiers, the Israel, don't feel that it's their own doing.
Oh,
So okay, so the commentators will, like I say, will kind of pick up on that. Um, there's and there's a reference back, what we call a proof text. There's a reference back to a quote in Deuteronomy of, lest you think that this is your own doing, kind of thing, that this is not God. But on the other hand, so verse 5 is trying to make it clear that God is saying, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to make it happen, and don't you forget it. On the one hand, don't you forget it, but also don't misuse or abuse the gift that I'm giving you, the gift of victory in Jericho that I'm giving you. Yes, Steve.
Yeah. And it's important to recognize also that this is national mythology. It's not national history, but national mythology, because it's actually been disputed based on, I think
Right.
the available archaeological evidence is that Jericho wasn't even walled. It didn't even have a wall. So
does this come from that book you're reading?
it's yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I've got to get
and
that
this
book.
and again, I'm not an archaeological scholar. I don't know what all
Right.
the archaeologists are saying, but that's these areas have undergone excavation, and it's not that necessarily that hard to determine if the city had a wall or didn't have a wall. And what they say in this book, it's called the Bible Unearthed, is that actually these Canaanite cities tended not to be fortified with walls because they were sort of under the control at the time. The superpower was Egypt to the south, and they were sort of under control of Egypt, and Egypt didn't want them putting up walls, so
Yeah.
they
One
didn't
of
have walls.
one of my professors. Well, there are a couple of things. There's another theory, and now it may have been somewhat disproven or fallen out of good favor in the last generation or so, is that it was an earthquake.
Right,
Oh,
I've heard that.
But again, one of my professors, I don't remember which one. Okay, I don't remember exactly with whom we were looking at this text in Israel. but was saying that it wasn't so much the city that was walled and fortified as it was the water source.
Hmm.
So the whole city wasn't, but specifically though, because they have found some walls, but like you say, not enough to warrant the conclusion that the entire city was walled that way.
However, I have a friend who went to Jericho, and she told me that the tourist guide pointed out the remnants of the wall that came down. And she
A wall,
saw
right?
them, and
right,
she
right.
saw them. So just letting you know.
Oh yeah, well, I can take you there too. I can show you probably the exact place where they stood,
Yep.
and the souvenir shop right across the street.
Yes. Yep.
Rocks.
Yep.
We were
No.
studying the souvenir shop, right?
Right.
Somebody's got to do it.
No, and they actually they even some of the tour guides even take you up to walk on the wall.
Hmm.
Oh, really?
Or they reenact and said, okay, let's walk around just like, and they'll read a couple of passages here. It's like,
Oh.
let's walk around, and they've hidden a shofar on the tour bus, and they pull out a shofar and say, let's reenact
Darn.
this. It's great. It's great.
Yeah. Huh. I got to go back and try that out.
Okay, you're on. You're on. All right.
Huh.
Ricky, you want to continue as of 12 now?
Whoa. Sure. Okay. Joshua rose early the next day, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, while the 7 priests bearing the 7 ram's horns marched in front of the ark of the Lord, blowing the horns as they marched. The vanguard marched in front of them, and the rear guard marched behind them, behind the ark of the Lord, with the horn sounding all the time. And so they marched around the city once on the 2nd day and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they rose at daybreak and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. That was the
Incidentally,
Yeah.
that little quote is brought up in the discussion in the Talmud in the tractate about Rosh Hashanah as to whether or not you should blow the shofar when Rosh Hashanah is Shabbat. Okay, because
Oh.
here it says that they
Oh.
blew it every day for 7 days. Doesn't
Right.
say that they ceased on the Shabbat, right?
Hmm. No.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Hmm. Oh. Okay.
Okay, and they marched around the city 7 times. On the 7th round, as the priests blew the horns, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and everything in it are to be prescribed for the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot is to be spared, and all who are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers we sent."
And
But you,
again, I kind of said that depending on which translation and which
Yeah.
rabbi you wanted to follow, whether she was a harlot prostitute or whether she was just a simple innkeeper, whichever way you want to look at it.
well,
Well, she
the
could have been
Jewish
both.
Study Bible has her as a
It could have
harlot.
been both. You're right.
Yeah.
And the Hebrew word is
Zonah.
is usually harlot, even though I could look that one up too.
Well, again,
And see-
and we mentioned that it's Zonah, obviously as the reference to with sexual connotation and overtone, but there are some that say it's related to mazon, that
Oh,
she provided
okay.
sustenance to the visitors, and
Okay.
whatever. The majority follow the Zonah prostitute harlot,
Let's make it sexier.
madam, right?
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. But you must beware of that which is proscribed, or else you will be proscribed. If you take anything from that which is proscribed, you will cause the camp of Israel to be proscribed. You will
Okay,
bring.
keep that one in mind. It's almost
Okay.
like
Yeah, the
put
4
a
times was
little
said proscribed. Yeah.
put a little question mark or paperclip from that little warning phrase because we're going to need it as background when we get to the next chapter and the next story.
Okay.
Okay. All the silver and gold and objects of copper and iron are consecrated to the Lord. They must go into the treasury of the Lord. So the people shouted when the horns were sounded. When the people heard the sound of the horns, the people raised a mighty shout and the wall collapsed. The people rushed into the city, every man straight in front of him, and they captured the city. They exterminated everything in the city with the sword, man and woman, young and old, ox and sheep and ass. But Joshua bade the 2 men who had spied out the land, go into the harlot's house and bring out the woman and all that belonged to her, as you swore to her.
Oh, now wait a minute.
Mm.
If they all the walls fell down, Rahab's house was built into the walls of the city. Remember?
Yep.
So
Right.
I'm not sure how they could, go and find her in the house if it had fallen down. But again, we're not worried about contradiction.
Rumor was on the back of the house, so it was away from the wall.
Well, I mean that's
Right.
that's the answer to what the
Right.
archaeologists were saying is that only a part of the wall fell down,
Right.
but because of Rahab's heroism and whatever, that part of the wall was spared. Okay.
Sounds reasonable to me. I don't know.
Well, if you've ever been through a hurricane, I've seen where half a house just disappears. And
Oh
that's
yeah, well
right.
there's
That's
stories
okay.
in the fires in Los Angeles right now
Yeah.
is that
Right.
one building or house could be just totally unaffected.
No,
They
I've seen in my hurricane work that literally the half the house was sheared off and the other half
Oh yeah,
was
sure.
still standing and in good shape.
Yep. Yep.
So anyway, so the young spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father and her mother, her brothers, and all that belonged to her. They brought out her whole family and left them outside the camp of Israel. They burned down the city and everything in it, but the silver and gold and the objects of copper and iron were deposited in the treasury of the house of the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and her father's family were spared by Joshua, along with all that belonged to her, and she dwelt among the Israelites, as is still the case. Who is she? For she
What
had
does that-
hidden the messengers that Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. At that time, Joshua pronounced this oath: Cursed of the Lord be the man who shall undertake to fortify the city of Jericho. He shall lay its foundations at the cost of his firstborn, and set up its gates at the cost of the youngest. The Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. Oh, that's 26 is pretty scary.
Really?
Right. Okay. All right. So let me work backwards for a minute.
Sure.
Again, this is not Joshua calling for human sacrifice. Okay.
Mhm.
He's not saying we're going to kill the firstborn. He's saying that remember that with this again he's talking to the people, he's talking to the Israelites. Remember what the ultimate punishment that God delivered to Egypt, to Pharaoh, was the death of the firstborn. So Joshua is trying to make the case that this experience we have at Jericho is just as formative for us as a people as the plagues and then the exodus from Egypt, symbolized or epitomized by the killing of the slaying of the firstborn. So we have to raise this experience to that level.
Okay.
That's what he means, not calling for the death of the firstborn.
Well, here you've got the firstborn who would be the oldest and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest. So what's the story there?
Just a threat.
Okay.
Again,
Oh.
like I said,
So the
like
middle child is
a
spared.
memory trigger.
Okay.
Whether it's the firstborn, whether it's the youngest, but that's the way God has exacted punishment. Okay.
And in a lot of families, it's the middle child who's the most, out there that's not part of. Right. The middle child has a special place, which is usually awkward because everybody teams up against them.
Right.
Right.
Right. And again, as I mentioned, when we first encountered the story of Rahab, some of the commentators interpret two things. One, in her words, that she converts, she accepts the God of Israel,
Hmm.
okay, like Ruth does later on. And then
Right.
secondly, the reason that Joshua agrees to protect her and her family when who is, who is she, is whatever, is there's a tradition, a commentary, there's a tradition that Joshua marries her,
Mm.
that she becomes Mrs. Joshua.
Okay.
Right.
Well, she's an
Right.
innkeeper. That's good.
Yeah. All right. But the other thing that I was gonna say is, so Joshua, it says that Joshua kept her alive,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
Okay. But when they brought her and her family back, it specifically says, I forget which verse it is. 23, I guess. It specifically says that they were brought out in safety, but they were kept outside of
That's
the
not
camp.
the hand.
Okay, they're considered outsiders. So they were given the safekeeping that the spies had promised her, but in that tradition, they weren't necessarily led inside the camp.
Except then in verse
But
25,
but
yeah,
yeah, right. But then,
she
so
dwelled among the Israelites.
something happened that allowed her to, in 25, dwell in the midst of Israel unto this very day, meaning that there are references in the stories of the people and descendants. Her descendants are mentioned. I believe it's in the book of Chronicles. Her descendants are mentioned as legitimate men, descendants of the Israelites, and so that's how they kind of come together and say, because she became Mrs. Joshua.
Well, she had to live near him in order for him to court her before they got married. So that would make
Court.
sense.
I don't know if I would say court, but claim.
Well, yeah, he was a gentleman.
Because
So.
he was a gentleman. Got it. Okay. The claim, as I said, and this is the foreshadowing of what we're going to encounter in chapter 7, and then later on with references to it, is the claim is, don't touch the booty. The booty belongs to God. Booty in the sense of the gold, the silver, and all that. That goes into the holy sacrament, a sanctuary. We use booty colloquially in a different way these days.
Yes.
Okay, there they're talking about the silver, the gold, the vessels of brass and iron.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Let's move on. Chapter 7. Who wants to read? We'll help you with the Hebrew names.
Oh, I can read again.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. The Israelites, however, violated the proscription.
Oops.
Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took of that which was proscribed, and God was incensed with the Israelites.
Okay. Stop
Okay.
for a minute, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay. The opening sentence of the chapter is that who committed the trespass? Who sinned? Who erred?
Israelites.
Well, it's
Plural.
one particular person.
No. At first,
Well,
the opening phrase, Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel.
Right. The whole
Okay.
tribe.
But then it goes on to say, here's what this one guy did.
Right.
Okay. and then it finishes at the end of the end of verse 1. The anger of God was kindled against all the children of Israel.
Right, on
Mhm.
Israel.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be collective punishment for the acts of one.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
As opposed to, we go back to the story. I think this is near where, or it's either near previously or we're coming up to on the Saturday morning, the story of Pinchas. Have we done Pinchas yet on Saturday morning? I know we've referred to it. Okay, the
I don't think
Pinchas,
so.
who's the zealot,
Mhm.
who slays
Oh.
the Israelite and the Midianite woman. Okay, but there and he and his generation are rewarded with Brit Shalom, with a covenant of peace, even though he did this deed that seems to us problematic, but it's considered an act of zealotry, positive. Here, when one person does it, the entire people are going to be punished. So we have to try to understand why. What's the difference? What's the difference now
Yeah.
from earlier on when all the people did only those who were punished as opposed to only the one or two, or the ones who with Korach, it's who stands with him and who crosses the line and whatever, those are the ones, and so, and now it's collective punishment apparently for everybody, even
Yeah.
though it specifically says that it was one guy who trespassed. All right, throwing it out.
Yeah.
Stephen,
Could I say
go ahead.
something?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, as the saying is, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh. That
Oh,
to
Exactly.
some degree, you're
Exactly.
all it, even though you don't necessarily enforce this idea in every situation, but in general, we're all responsible for each other.
yeah.
And when one person screws up in a major way, it kind of reflects on all of us.
Yeah.
And we have to do a very good job
It's
of
exactly the
policing
lesson
ourselves.
it's exactly the lesson that the commentators pick up from this story.
So
Because
nothing less than complete obedience or perfection is, that's it. That's it.
Ideally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bit
Okay.
harsh.
Let's go on with the story of Achan. And incidentally, again, I'll share it with the Hebrew speakers here. They make a point of saying we have to be very, very careful of the name is Achan as opposed to Achar. You have to. It's one of those where you have to be very careful in the spelling and in the script when you see this written in Hebrew. They got to make sure that it's a nun and not a resh, because achar or acher always was kind of like a synonym for the other. And again, I don't want to get political here, but the other, capital O, meaning the deceiver, the Satan, the enemy, the other kind of thing. So they made sure, if we're telling this story, you have to make sure to emphasize that it's an N at the end and not a R sound.
but the acher would have to start with an aleph, and there's an ayin. Ayin and aleph are not the same letter. Even though we pronounce them as Ashkenazim, we pronounce them the same, but they weren't originally the same letter. The ayin is a guttural sound.
Yeah,
if
right.
you hear Yemenites speak,
you can
they
tell
say
the difference,
ayin.
right? Mhm.
It starts down in the throat. So
right.
But
again,
I mean, is that a
as
midrash?
the oral tradition, right? And then it follows up. Yeah. Okay. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not. I'm sort of puzzled by that. Is that an actual midrash, or is that sort of a later thing that
I think it's a later thing.
oh,
I think it's a later thing.
because those are, yeah, the words
Yeah,
are totally different
right.
because, you know,
I'll
like,
see if I can look back. I remembered it. I'm seeing if I can. Um, I have a reference that somewhere that in later places, later references in the Tanakh, the there are references to the name being changed from Achan to Achar. So I'll look and see,
hmm,
but I wrote it in English, so I'll have to look and see. I'll have to look and see exactly where it got. I need a concordance, and I'll look it up.
mhm.
I'll try
Okay.
to, I'll circle it, and I'll try to find an answer. All right, let's go on. So at verse 2 then.
Oh, I'm reading. Right,
Oh
right.
yeah, you were reading. Yeah.
Okay. Joshua sent some men from Jericho to Ai, which lies close to Bet Aven. What is it in Hebrew? Bet Aven. Yeah, okay. East of Bethel, with orders to go up and spy out the country. So the men went up and spied out Ai, which is an Ain, so it's I, actually.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
And they returned to Joshua and reported to him, not all the troops need go up. Let 2 or 3,000 men go and attack Ai. Do not trouble all the troops to go up there, for the people there are few. Okay. So about 3,000 of the troops marched up there, but they were routed by the men of Ai. The men of Ai killed about 36 of them, pursuing them outside the gates as far as Shvarim and cutting them down along the descent. And the heart of the troops sank in utter dismay.
Well,
Joshua thereupon rent his clothes. He and the elders of Israel lay until evening with their faces to the ground in front of the ark of God, and they strewed earth on their heads. Ah, my sovereign God, cried Joshua, why did you lead this people across the Jordan only to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites, to be destroyed by them? If only we had been content to remain on the other side of the Jordan. Oh, my sovereign, what can I say after Israel has turned tail before its enemies? When the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land hear of this, they will turn upon us and wipe out our very name from the earth. And what will you do about your great name? But God answered Joshua, arise, why do you lie prostrate?
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let's pause for a second at
Sure.
the end of 9.
Okay.
yeah,
I guess my response is, wow.
yeah, really.
All of a sudden, Joshua, I mean, the people have complained like that before,
Yeah,
right? You know, would have been better to stay in Egypt, and you know, da, 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 why did you bring us into this land, and da, da, da. But whoa, this, you know, this particular loss of 36 men, and now he's so depressed, so grieved that he you talks in these terms,
yeah,
and that's the leader of the people.
yeah.
Wow.
What will you do about your great name? I'm going,
You know, what does that mean? What's he saying, Gail? What do you
well,
think?
he's telling God, your reputation is going to go down to whatever if,
Tubes, yeah.
Yeah, it's not right. It's not, you know, it's like Joshua says, listen, I've heard you time and time again saying that you're with us. You're
Yeah.
with us. If we go down to defeat, that's your reputation.
That's on you. Yeah, that's
Right.
not on us,
Uh-huh.
that's on you. Again, this maturing of the society, where does this blame go? Who's going to take responsibility? Yeah, it's a whole
Right.
interesting. What will you
Right.
do about your great name? Whoa. Hmm. Hmm. Interesting.
Okay. All right. And incidentally, the sidebar, if you will, if you go back to 6, Joshua tore his clothes, fell to the earth,
Right.
those and then put dust upon their heads. The last one, dust on their heads, that's no longer part of the Jewish ritual when you hear the death of someone. But still tearing your clothes
Very
and
close.
and falling on your face, or and praying and and grieving, loudly bewailing, so to speak. Those are, but we no longer. I'm not even sure how much longer past early biblical times was putting a sign of dust, of
No.
dirt on it gets picked up with Ash Wednesday, but I'm not sure how long it stayed within the Israelite community as a sign of mourning. Okay, now go back to 10.
Okay, so now we have, and God answered Joshua, arise, why do you lie prostrate? Okay, Israel has sinned. They have broken the covenant by which I bound them. They have taken of the prescribed and put it in their vessels. They have stolen. They have broken faith. Therefore, the Israelites will not be able to hold their ground against their enemies. They will have to turn tail before their enemies, for they have become prescribed. I will not be with you anymore unless you root out from among you what is prescribed. And of course,
Right.
the
Okay.
word for
Again, remember, as
prescribed
far
is
as we know, it was just the one guy,
Yeah.
Achan,
Yep.
whether it's with an iron or an aleph, but just Achan. It's just the one guy who did it. Right.
Mhm. And the word in Hebrew that's used for prescribed is cherem,
Right.
which is,
We've talked about that, yeah, a
you
number of
know,
times. Right.
okay. Go and purify the people. Order them, purify yourselves for tomorrow. For thus says the Eternal, the God of Israel, something prescribed is in your midst, O Israel, and you will not be able to stand up to your enemies until you have purged the prescribed from among you. Tomorrow morning you shall present yourselves by tribes. Whichever tribe God indicates shall come forward by clans. The clan that God indicates shall come forward by ancestral houses, and the ancestral house that God indicates shall come forward man by man.
Okay.
Then,
Process of elimination. Right.
Right.
Starting with the tribes to the families to the individuals. Right.
okay, then he who is indicated for proscription, and all that is his shall be put to the fire, because he broke the covenant of God and because he committed an outrage in Israel. Early next morning, Joshua had Israel come forward by tribes, and the tribe of Judah was indicated. He then had the clans of Judah come forward, and the clan of Zerah was indicated. Then he had the clan of Zerah come forward by ancestral houses, and Zabdi was indicated. Finally, he had his ancestral house come forward man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was indicated. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, pay honor to the Eternal, the God of Israel, by making confession. Tell me what you have done. Do not hold anything back from me. Achan answered Joshua, it is true. I have sinned against the Eternal, the God of Israel. This is what I did. I saw among the spoil a fine Shinar mantle, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels. And I coveted them and took them. They are buried in the ground in my tent with the silver under the mantle. And Shinar, okay. Okay, that's not translated. Okay. Joshua sent messengers who hurried to the tent, and there was the mantle buried in his tent with the silver underneath. They took them from the tent and brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites and displayed them before God. Then Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, son of Zerah, and the silver, the mantle, and the wedge of gold, his sons and daughters, and his ox, his donkey, and his flock, and his tent, and all his belongings, and brought them up to the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, "What calamity you have brought upon us? God will bring calamity upon you this day." And all Israel
Whoa.
pelted him with stones. They put them to the fire and stoned them. They raised a huge mount of stones over him, which is still there. Then God's anger subsided. That is why that place was named the Valley of Achor, as is still the case.
Okay.
Interesting. I have a question.
All right.
And-
Well, before you have a question,
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'll just point out that the Valley of Achor, according to the archaeologists and the tour guides that I've always been with, the Valley of Achor is Wadi Kelt.
Oh,
Okay, which you pass Wadi Kelt when you descend from Jerusalem to on the road to the Dead Sea, and Jericho will be on your left, and then the Dead Sea will be off to your right. Wadi Kelt
Oh,
is the wadi, the dry riverbed that's at the base of the mountain ridge, the Judean hills, where Jerusalem is at the top and Jericho's at the bottom.
oh,
That's Wadi.
Mhm.
That's Wadi Kelt,
And you can
that's what it
actually
says,
hike
the
that.
Valley of Achor. Say what?
That's a hike. You can hike that. And
Oh,
I think we did it in high school, actually, in Israel.
probably. And there was, I forget his name, but there was an evangelical minister who, now whether he was, trying to do something with this particular story, I don't know. But there was a big story. This probably is in this. I guess it would have to be in the 70s. There was some evangelical minister who led a tour on a hike of Wadi Kelt and whatever they were looking for signs of something from the biblical thing, and he died, and the people struggled back up, and whether they had visions and whatever. Does that sound familiar to you, Steve, at all?
whoa.
Yeah.
I'm not
Okay.
recalling that story.
I just
Yeah.
remember it taking place in Wadi Kelt. But
Hmm.
I guess for the last 20 years, nobody's been telling the story. But I do remember
Hmm.
from a long
Have to
time
look
ago.
it up, Google it.
Okay, Gail,
Yeah.
what's the question?
Okay, so in 25, okay, Joshua said, "What calamity you have brought upon us? The Lord will bring calamity upon you this day." Now, Joshua is actually going to do the Lord's bidding, but the Lord is not doing the calamity part. Joshua is. You understand? Maybe I didn't get that right, but that's what it sounds like to me. He's putting the blame on God, or the responsibility for that on God to do the firing them, or putting them to fire and stoning them. It's like I don't know, it's just a weird shift. What calamity you have brought upon us? The Lord will bring calamity upon you this day.
Well, maybe he's referring to the whole house, and for generations there'll be like a stigma and a curse upon them, and that's more coming from God than
No, he's talking
Yeah,
about this
right,
guy.
right.
well,
Mhm.
yes, but it's sort of part of who you are is your descendants and your household and everything that comes after you.
Well, okay, so two things. I'm just doing a quick
Whatever.
look. I'm doing a quick look at the commentary collection here. Okay, so two things. One is that lest we get confused, while his sons and daughters and and all that they had, well, they were all brought to the valley, to the execution spot. It's still
Right.
only Achan who's executed. Okay, it's that they killed him, and the others had to witness it. Okay, that's number one. Number two is to your point, Gail, with 25. Yes, that the Israelites and under Joshua's command are going to be stoning him to death.
Right.
But and we're doing God's will. but the commentators focused on this day, while it's why it says, that this shall happen by Yom Hazeh, on this day. And they take it, whether we want to agree with it or not, it's a theological position. They say that means that this is what we call, this is the punishment ba'olam hazeh, in this world, but that doesn't mean that you can't find redemption in the world to come.
Oh,
Okay.
hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So while there may be humanly punished, punished for the human, for the body, ultimately by teshuvah, by repentance and whatever, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek ba'olam haba. All Israelites, even though they sin, have a portion in the world to come. So that's why the commentators say the focus is on those two words, Bayom Hazeh, on this day.
Okay.
Again, whether we like that interpretation or not, but that's how they
Yeah.
dealt with it.
Okay. Oh.
Okay.
Hmm.
So let's see how quickly we can do. Should we try to do one more chapter? It's a long chapter.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, 8. You know what? Let's not. Let's
Yeah.
because there's a lot there. So we'll hold off at the end of 7,
Okay.
and we'll pick up next week. Let me just broach the question. Is this because of course there are only a couple of us here that came out of the discussion in the Saturday morning group, but is this pattern following the I guess the request of the Saturday morning people who wanted to look at doing it this way, to reading through and trying to look at some of the commentaries,
Yeah.
but
Well,
but not.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is
We don't
open
have
to
to
the,
figure-
this is open
Yeah,
to
we
the
don't-
entire congregation. This is not a select group, right?
Oh,
You know,
definitely,
of-
definitely.
of the regular Torah. So, I guess when I suggested it, I think I was the one who suggested it, of what I'm interested in, and I speak only for myself, is, adult education, in other
Yes.
words,
Yes.
and not, and so that would depend a lot on Norm, okay, and
But
that's what I would like to see. I'm not speaking for Saturday Torah study group, just for
No.
myself.
right,
That's
right. Oh, okay, but doing it this way, is this kind of going in the direction that you'd like to see it going with adult education, or
Yes,
Yeah,
for me, yes.
last week, but I like that. Okay, adult ed to me is more like when you get up and lecture us, tell us, it's a class. But the Torah study, we used to, we could spend an hour on one word,
Right.
so it was very extreme. And this seems to be a balance of your information that you are imparting to us and somewhat about our reaction to whatever we've just read.
Right.
So I think this is like half between the two extremes.
No, I like this, what we're doing. I really
Okay.
do. And I will come
I
back
do
to
too.
Torah study eventually, but Liverpool is really having a heck of a year. And
I
just can't.
priorities.
I'm sorry, but I live and die by Liverpool's.
Her every year at this time of year.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and then there's
so-
the World Cup
so-
next year. So
Right. So what I'm gonna do is that with that basically positive input, and which I appreciate, is I'm gonna, because like I said, my hope was that we were going to be more than halfway through the book by now, but we're not even a third. So I'm going to look and see if there are going further. I know that in March I'm going to be gone. I have to look and see if I would be able to still do the Zoom from 1 week is going to be in New Jersey, 1 week will be in Detroit or Chicago. I'm not sure the exact dates of when, but let me look and see on the temple calendar and my calendar or whatever, if given this time slot, if we can, book maybe another 3 sessions
Yeah,
to
just be
continue.
careful you don't run into the sisterhood dates. That's the
Right,
only
that's
thing.
all. That's the second Tuesday, right?
In
Yep.
some of the events would be the third Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, we may not be able to do 3 sessions right in a row,
Yeah.
Right.
but we'll look and see if we can get it on the calendar, and
Okay.
I'll get that sent out right away.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to make a suggestion if I could.
Sure.
Okay, that one of the things that I guess, slows the progress is reading every verse. And this is speaking only for myself, okay? But it's been done, Torah study and Judaic study, okay, in the larger sense, has been done in different ways. And, there were persons who conducted Torah study, Shabbat Torah study, in more focusing on, what the Iker was, what the
Substance,
main
yeah. Or
message
essence,
was,
right.
rather than strictly having, okay, you read verse 1 through 8 now, because that does obviously it's going to make our
Right.
progress a little bit slower. If there would be, and again, this has to be on the group, okay? This is not just what I think or just what Ricky
Right.
thinks, or this is what everybody would like to do. Speaking for myself personally, I don't necessarily have to read every verse or
Right.
hear somebody reading every verse. I would rather get the substance, let's go for the main thing. Let's go for the substance. Yeah. Wait, if two people talking at once, nobody
Sure.
gets heard, Ricky. Okay, just
Well,
okay. So that's all I'm saying. Okay,
Okay,
it's
all right.
maybe we consider not reading every verse, but just going
Okay,
for
Ricky,
the main theme.
Ricky, then Gail, then I don't know about
Yeah.
Marianne, but I want to respond to that too. So okay.
It's just that somebody then has to pre-read to be able to know what not to read, so
No, the
Um,
rabbi gives guidance for that. The rabbi knows what the main theme
okay,
is.
all right. No, that's your answer.
It's
Okay.
not for me to come up with what the main theme is of the chapter or
Okay.
whatever we're doing. It could be, it could be 8 chapters that have a main idea and a main theme, and we just focus on that heart of the matter,
Right.
rather than
Okay.
trying to
Okay.
read every
Okay,
verse.
got your point, Steve. Gail?
Yeah, that sounds, sometimes that's not possible, what Steve was saying.
Mhm.
Sometimes it is. So it's almost a week by week thing. I don't know.
All
I'm
right,
being very wishy-washy.
Marianne?
Yeah, I prefer to do verse by verse simply because I'm new and I'm learning. And a lot of the words in here, I think, are important. The number 7 is repeated over and over again. Well, I do believe that there was a Jericho and the walls did fall down on a physical sense. I think it is on a spiritual sense that when the power of God comes into something, the walls inside of our minds and our hearts can be eliminated. So to me, it's very important to read this line by line, word by word.
Okay, all right. And there may be a happy medium. Stephen, I understand and I respect your point, but it's possible. I don't know if I would say it's likely, but it's possible that there would be people who would be joining the group if it's in the context of adult education and open to everybody who really have never even read the book at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so so yes, if I think that if there are blocks that we can indeed skip, maybe I can do a little bit of that. But I would lean towards reading or skimming or at least racing through almost totally line by line. And if it takes us a little longer, I would rather do that than assuming that people have can make the connections or follow along the story and whatever. But we'll continue to experiment. Look, it's an open
Right.
process. All right, I'm going to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be well, everybody.
You too.
You too.
And we're definitely on for next Tuesday, and then we'll see if we can also find some other opportunities to continue
Right.
with it. Hopefully,
Okay.
see you at Bagel Breakfast or some other get together in the near future.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well.
Bye-bye.